Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to another World of Wakfu video. Yeah, that's right, I didn't forget about this series. We're still doing it once a month. And I believe this is the second to last one, actually. Let me check real quick. Yeah, there's this one, and then next month's will be the final one. So let us talk about this month's World of Wakfu. We are talking, obviously, as you can tell by the title, about characters. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again. In my opinion, characters are one of the two things that make or break a series. Any show, any movie, any game, anything pretty much lives and dies by its story and its characters. And we've talked a bit about the story of this series. We've talked about how this series does with all of that kind of thing. And we've even talked about one of its characters, its main character, with Yugo. In fact, that was our very first Why I Love Wakfu video. But today we're just going to talk about the characters in general, both good and bad, both main and minor. We're going to talk about how they just affect and impact this world in a way that's meaningful. We're going to discuss how they just come across as important and stuff like that. So, let's talk about our main characters first. In other words, the Brotherhood of Tofu. So, our main characters are comprised of a few ragtag bunch of heroes who kind of get together through necessity. I've already talked a lot about Yugo, so I'm not going to do as much about him again today, but Yugo is an orphan who knows pretty much nothing about his past or where he comes from. He's on a journey to discover his true heritage, and the others are basically helping him out along the way. Fighting a bunch of monsters and going through a bunch of adventures and stuff. His first real companion is his tofu, Az. Az doesn't have too much of a character in comparison to pretty much any of the others, but that's usually how an animal sidekick character ends up working. They're usually there to provide a little bit of comic relief, a little bit of snarky reaction faces and stuff, that kind of thing. And Az does that pretty well. I mean, if you compare it to like Disney's animal sidekick characters, of course, Az doesn't really talk. But you do have the definitely the reactions down nonetheless. Then you have Rule Stroud. Rule Stroud is an old friend of Yugo's adopted father, Alibert. Rule is a money-hungry enotroph. He loves money, he loves collecting money, he just loves anything to do with money. And he's so in love with it that he even hates spending it or giving it away. He's extremely cheap, in other words. Rule's role is kind of like this. He kind of plays like this wise old hermit character, except they make him very comical, which is really interesting because he's definitely in that kind of role as a character for this group. But they don't actually follow through with the wise old hermit part. He's not like a notable mentor to the characters. I mean, there are a couple points where he'll point out something that the others would not or just may not know. Point out something about like the world or whatnot. But for the most part, he's just being himself. Now, Rule is one of my least favorite characters because he doesn't have as much depth to him. But that's not to say he doesn't have any. As we see in Season 3, he actually has a lot of regrets in his life, especially regarding his wife. And I might be mispronouncing this name, because remember, I do these World of Wakfu videos off the top of my head. I'm not looking up all this info. But I believe his wife's name is Arpagani or something like that. Something similar to that. But there's a lot of regret in his life through just basically abandoning her for money for the sake of commas. We see throughout the series he does have this certain noble soul to him, where he does understand right and wrong and is like more than willing to fight for the side of right. We do see that, but at the same time, his greediness does oftentimes supersede his, again, noble spirit, you could call it, his willingness to do right. And that comes into play a few different times throughout the series. The next ones to really kind of join in the group, you could say, are Ava and Amalia. They actually kind of join at the same time as Tristapin, but I'm going to mention them first because they appear first in the series. In the same episode, but they actually appear earlier. You know what I mean. So Ava and Amalia are a duo in a way. They travel together, they work together, they're best friends, and we see that they have just a lot of history together even before the series really starts. Amalia is the princess of the Sarida kingdom. She's a little bit rich, she's a little bit of a rich and spoiled archetype, but not to an unlikable level. Like, I've seen a lot of those types of characters throughout just all kinds of different media, and she never takes it too far, in my opinion. And obviously, as the series progresses, she starts to lose that, actually. She starts to lose her pompous princess personality, to use a little bit of alliteration there. She actually does start to lose that and becomes a lot more down to earth, which I guess is a fitting pun for her powers, her geomancy. Okay, enough with that, though. But yeah, she legitimately does become more down to earth. She starts to just chill out a little bit. Because at the beginning, mostly during season 1 especially, she's, again, very pompous. She's very pretentious. She has this air of ego to her. And it really helps her come across as this kind of pampered princess character. So that as she grows and everything, it feels very well earned, which is a very good thing. Ava, on the other hand, is kind of like a bodyguard to her, traveling with her to keep her safe and protect her during these adventures and stuff. Ava is a Kra, which basically means she's an elf. Let's be honest, she's an elf. She's skilled in archery. Ah, crap, my camera keeps messing up today. She's skilled in archery. She's a lot more down to earth than Amalia at the beginning, and she's very forward thinking. Now, she's not always the smartest. She does make, but she's compared to the rest of the. I don't know why it's doing that. Compared to the rest of the Brotherhood of the Tofu, she's a lot more forward thinking, a lot more just, you know, like, she puts more effort into everything. We also see that she takes things a lot more seriously and is often the first one to really get spurred into action. She'll often be more at the ready for any kind of encounter than the others. We also have Tristapin, as I mentioned. Tristapin is more of comic relief at first. He's very much the goofy type of character. He kind of has this playboy kind of personality to where he's always hounding after Ava and everything, and it comes across as a little annoying at first. But then we actually start to see more to his character. We start to see he actually has a very noble warrior spirit to him, to where he actually respects Amalia a great deal. And not just Amalia, but, I mean, I meant Ava. Ooh, that's a little mess up there. He respects Ava a great deal. He's not just hounding after her, he does respect her. And as we see, he really will fight. And even to the point of sacrificing himself for those he cares for. He comes across as a very, very worthy hero. And a lot of times he's very similar to the kind of hero you would see, the kind of male hero you would see in a lot of fairy tale stories and whatnot. A lot of these kind of these kind of adventures. Um, and as the series goes on, we see that he 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 stops being as much of the playboy type character. He that kind of, just like with Amalia's pompousness, that kind of fades as time goes on, and his pining after Ava becomes more of a legitimate uh, romantic interest in her. It's less so about finding her just generally attractive, and more so about being attracted to her, if you know what I mean. Um, and it's actually really cool to see. It's actually really cool to see this character, who kind of starts off as a bit of a lecherous pervert in a way, grow into a character who's actually really respectable. Um, and we see that especially how far he's come in season three. You could tell he's not the same character as he used to be. Um, but then you have other characters who are kind of allied with the Brotherhood of the Tofu, like Cleofe and the pirate girl, who I can never remember the name of, but I always liked, um, and various other characters who come and go as well as they come and go. None of them really have this massive impact, but a few of them really do stand out. Cleofe, being Ava's sister and all, does stand out a little better. Um, for example, she's a lot more brash and adventurous than Ava. She's a lot more like Tristapin in terms of not thinking things through, in terms of not really giving a lot of foresight into her actions. She just kind of acts and takes things as they come. She's also a little more sassy and just she has a little bit more of a personality than Ava does initially. The pirate girl is fun and sassy. And the various other characters we see in the Sarida Kingdom, we see Chris Lacrasse. All of them have these fun characters, but none of them really stand out as much as the main characters, which is actually a good thing. Like, you would think, like, oh, that's not so good. We want the minor characters to stand out too, and they do. But what I'm saying here is they don't stand out as much as the main characters. They don't overshadow our heroes. And that's actually important. Because in any series where the minor characters overshadow our heroes, something's not being done right. You want your heroes, you want your main characters to be the focus, to have the most attention. And when they're overshadowed by minor characters, that means that you're not giving enough quality screen time to your main characters, and that they're not sticking out as much as they should be. They're the main characters for a reason. They should be at the forefront of your viewers' minds. And Wakfu definitely does that. And it's nothing against the minor characters. As I said, they're still good characters, and they're still enjoyable, and you still like them. They definitely still stand out. Just not as much. And I think that's a good thing. Ignore the dog. She's being a dog. Right, Piper? And then there's the villains. So let's talk about the villains here. So season 1 we had Nox. And Nox starts off as this kind of creepy, maniacal, time manipulating, he almost comes across as a wizard in a way. This like techno wizard. He comes across as very sly, very smart. He is very forward thinking. And as you see, as the season progresses, you start to find out why he's like this, why he's a bad guy. You get that motivation behind him. And you find out about how he's trying to do this for his family. He's trying to bring back his family and stuff, who he had neglected and basically caused the deaths of, in a way. And he's trying to bring them back because he misses them, and he feels regret and he feels sadness. Like, there's this one moment I've seen in pretty much every AMV for Wakfu that I've seen. There's this one moment where he's kneeling on the ground amongst all this wreckage and destruction. You see him like just turn his head a bit, and then you see tear fall from his mask. And it's this really powerful scene, because it really helps show like what kind of character Nox was. that he was a tragic villain, and that those kind of villains are important to show in this kind of thing. But then you have season 2, which kind of flips the script, as you will, with its villains. Because season 2, for one, does have 2 villains. It has Rushu, King of the Shushu, as well as Kilby, the traitorous Heliotrope. So let's start with Rushu. Unlike with Nox in season 1, who is a more tragic villain who just wants to get his family back, Rushu is just evil. He's just evil for the sake of being evil. He doesn't have any strong motivations or any like deep character stuff going on. He's basically Satan. Like, let's be honest. The Shushus are basically demons, and Rushu, as the king of the demons, basically would be Satan. He just basically loves destruction. He loves causing all of this mayhem and shit. And he wants to get out into the world of the 12, or whatever it's called. My mind is blanking on a lot of the specific details about that. I think it's the world of the 12. And my camera died again. Shit. I don't know why that keeps happening, by the way. I really don't. But yeah, I believe that's what it's called. Let me just check real quick. Yeah. There we are. The World of 12 is what it's called. He wants to get out into there because he wants to just basically destroy it and cause mayhem and shit. And the other Shushus that are escaped and stuff, he tries to like get to start to free him and stuff. And he's a fun villain in his own right, because sometimes a villain who is just evil for the sake of being evil can be good. Believe it or not, not every villain has to have all this deep motivation. Not every villain has to have these big reasons for the way they act or the things they believe. Sometimes simplicity is key. And Rushu comes across as a very intimidating, threatening force because of it. But then you have Kilby. Kilby is a traitorous Heliotrope who basically just wants to gather the Dofus for his own selfish desires and shit. Now we find out there is definitely more to his character. He's definitely a lot more in-depth of a character. But he's definitely the traitorous Benedict Arnold kind of character. So we see that Kilby, when he's first introduced, he's introduced as a good guy, as this Heliotrope who just kind of came out of nowhere and doesn't really have all of his memories and stuff. So as the season progresses, though, we start seeing some pretty suspicious things, and eventually it is revealed that he's a villain, and he even takes upon this new form. And this is done through multiple villains throughout media, where the villain will take on like this new form, a new outfit. They'll change in some way, maybe even just a straight-up transformation, once they are revealed to be evil. And with Kilby, he changes quite a bit. And he was always my favorite villain of Wakfu because of his personality. He has this wild child kind of personality. He's crazy, he's kooky, he's weird, and he's funny as hell. But he's also legitimately strong, and he knows what he's doing. He's a very smart villain. He is very smart. He is very knowledgeable on just the world and how to manipulate the people within it. He is a contrast to Nox as well, though, because while he does have a little more reasoning than, like, say, Rushu, he's just kind of a bad guy. He doesn't have, like, this big emotional, in-depth reasoning for his actions as much as he just has this, like, self-centered desire, and he just wants to kind of do this because he wants to do it. It's a lot more simple, is what I'm saying. even though it starts to bring the story into a little more of a complex stage. The character himself is what I'm saying. And then season 3 had a bunch of different villains, if you want to be technical. But there's 3 who really stand out that I want to talk about, of course. First, there's Toxine. Toxine is kind of the insane villain. And she comes across as very just wild card. Like, you never know what she's gonna do. There are points where she actually goes against, like, kind of the wishes of Oripo and Echo and just does her own thing. And what is this dog growling at? Hey! Oh, the male person's here. Sorry about that. But yeah, she kind of does her own thing and will go off and act on her own desires, her own will. And she comes across as very comical. Not like in a just straight up funny way, but more like, oh, it's like, this is actually really humorous, just the way she's acting. The way she speaks and the way she goes about it is just really entertaining. But then you do have Lady Echo, and she's more of the right-hand man archetype. She's very subservient to the main villain of Oripo, but at the same time, she also shows this very strong will herself. She comes across as very wise, very well put together. She doesn't seem to have any real semblances of insanity or any semblances of weirdness or wild attitude or anything. She's very well put together, and she's very smart. She's very you get the idea. And I always kind of joked that she was like best girl, or at least my favorite villain of season 3. And I kind of do stand by that, because she comes across as very cunning as well. She's the kind of villain who I could see like birthing this really elaborate, very, very smart plan on how to take down opponents, on how to take down enemies, or I guess in this case, good guys. But she also does have this side to her where she is subservient to Oripo because of her love for him. Oripo he's an heliotrope who, basically there's these time travel shenanigans, and he's kind of kind of Yugo, but kind of not. That part was always a little a little confusing to me, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, he comes across as like kind of the true antagonist of Wakfu so far. Like, even more so than either Nox or Kilby or Rushu. Basically, I think he's kind of like this alternate version of Yugo in a way. But either way, he was created through a time warp. He was created through all this time shenanigans, and he had to live through all of these centuries and centuries, and eventually started to create this master plan. Now, like Nox and Kilby, he does have motivation for his plans. He does have a reason to get through all of this, to gain the Dofus and the Elia Cube and all of that. But unlike them, he's a lot more... He seems a lot more of a emotional character. Like, he has more emotion and just, for lack of a better word, humanity to him. Nox seemed very... he seemed like he was trying to separate himself from his humanity as a way to be able to bring back his family. Rushu obviously was very lacking in humanity, and Kilby, all of the humanity we saw from him was, fake. So it was a ruse. But with Orapo, he definitely seems very human in term, again, for lack of a better word, in terms of just his personality and his character. And it's he kind of comes across as you almost understand where he's coming from in the end, but you still understand that his actions would be very bad, and he still needs to be stopped. So the villains come across as very, very well handled, and all of them feel different from each other. And even the minor villains are really interesting to see as well, just from the occasional episodic villain to the ones in season 3 who have more of a role but are still kind of episodic. Um, they all come across as interesting and unique. And then there's characters you see like maybe one episode. They're just these random side characters who appear to just move along the plots and stuff. And a lot of them are pretty interesting too. And then there's characters even who are more recurring characters but are still pretty minor, like Remington Smiths and his brother Granny, or Granny, or however it's pronounced. They're pretty interesting themselves. Not, but they're kind of on the level where they're like not super likable. It's not that I hate them as characters. It's just like I don't love them either. I don't really like them that much. They're kind of in this neutral territory. But the point is, the characters in any world, in any series, or again, game, movie, book, need to make the world that they're a part of feel alive. And the characters in Wakfu definitely do. Whether there are main characters, are villains, whether they're minor characters, or even just side characters there to move the plot along. If the characters in Wakfu feel like people. And they're not always the best people either. Some of them have a lot of issues going on. And even some of the main characters face a lot of issues. With family, with duty, with what's right and what's wrong, and even with love, especially in case of season 3 with Hugo and Amalia. And so I know this video is pretty long, but the characters, as I said, are one of the main things that make or break a series. And in my opinion, Wakfu's characters make the series. They definitely like give life to the world of 12 and allow for it to feel just so much more expansive and full of life. So, tell me in the comments below what you think of the characters of Wakfu. What do you think of our main heroes, of our villains, of the side characters? How do you think that they fit into this world? Tell me your thoughts on all of that and more in the comments below, and thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.